That was called Nebula's Edge, and it sat on the 23rd level of 9, a space station that floated at the crossroads of a dozen trade routes. Every species in the known galaxy passed through here at some point. The air always smelled like 100 different foods cooking at once, and the noise never really stopped. Danny Cole liked it here. He was a cargo hauler, which meant he spent most of his time alone in his small ship, moving boxes from one world to another. The pay was not great, but it was honest work. When he docked at 9, he always came to this. The coffee was terrible, but the view of the stars through the wide windows made up for it. Tonight, there was busy. Traders argued over prices at one table. A group of blue-skinned laughed loudly in the corner. Near the door, two insect-like clicked their mandibles in quiet conversation. Danny found his usual seat by the window and ordered his usual drink. That was when he noticed her. She sat alone at table 7 in the darkest corner of the room. Her skin was covered in scales that seemed to shift between black and deep purple in the light. Two horns curved back from her temples, elegant and sharp. Her eyes glowed a soft amber color like candles burning low. She was tall, even while sitting, and her posture was perfect, like someone who had been taught to never slouch. "What?" Danny had seen before, but always from a distance. They were rare outside their own space. Their empire, the Dominion, controlled half the galaxy. They were conquerors, rulers, the kind of species that made other species nervous just by existing. Most people avoided them out of fear. The stories about them were not kind. But this did not look frightening. She looked sad. She had a drink in front of her, something green and steaming, but she had not touched it. Her amber eyes stared at nothing. Her clawed hands rested flat on the table. She looked like someone waiting for something that would never come. Danny watched her for a while. Other patrons walked past her table without looking. Some changed direction to avoid getting too close. A waiter delivered her drink with shaking hands and practically ran away. She did not react to any of it. She just sat there, alone in a room full of people. Danny knew that kind of loneliness. He had felt it many times, floating between stars with no one to talk to. Space was big and empty, and it could make your heart feel the same way. He made a decision that his friends would later call stupid, brave, or both. He picked up his coffee and walked over to table 7. They looked up as he approached. Her amber eyes focused on him, and for a moment Danny felt very small. There was something ancient in that gaze, something that had seen things he could not imagine, but he did not stop. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, pointing to the chair across from her. She stared at him. Several seconds passed. Danny wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. "No," she finally said. Her voice was deep and smooth like distant thunder. "It is not." Danny sat down. He put his coffee on the table and smiled at her. "I'm Danny, Danny Cole. I haul cargo for a living, nothing fancy. What's your name?" They continued to stare at him. Her expression was impossible to read. "You are human," she said. "Last time I checked, yeah. Humans do not usually approach." Danny shrugged. "I'm not most humans, and you look like you could use some company. That drink has been sitting there getting cold for 20 minutes. Either you really hate it or something is bothering you." For a long moment she said nothing. Then something shifted in her eyes. The hard, distant look softened just a little. "My name is," she said. Danny nodded. "That's a nice name. So what brings you to this station? Business, travel, running away from something?" She tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle she could not solve. "Why do you want to know?" "Because that's what people do when they meet someone new. They ask questions. They share stories. They find out if the other person likes the same bad music or hates the same foods." Danny grinned. "So, let me start. I hate vegetables but love spicy food. I think most station music is garbage, but I have a soft spot for old earth jazz. What about you?" Blinked slowly. "No one has ever asked me such questions before." "Really? That's sad. Those are the best kinds of questions." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I do not hate vegetables. I find most human food too salty, and I have never heard Earth jazz." Danny's grin widened. "Well, that settles it. We need to fix that immediately. There's a vendor on level 15 who sells music chips from all over the galaxy. I'll get you something good, something classic. Louis, maybe, you'll love it." Looked at him with something like confusion. "You wish to purchase music for me. We have known each other for less than 5 minutes." So, 5 minutes is enough to know someone needs cheering up, and good music is the fastest way to do that. She did not smile, but the sadness in her eyes lifted just a tiny bit. "You are a strange human, Danny Cole." "I've been called worse." They talked for another hour. Danny did most of the talking at first, telling her about his ship, his routes, his favorite ports. He told her about Earth, a planet he had not visited in years but still called home in his heart. He described rain, which she had never experienced. He described coffee shops on quiet mornings, which she found fascinating. Slowly began to talk too. She spoke carefully, choosing her words like they were precious stones. She mentioned that she traveled often for her work, that she rarely stayed in one place for long, that she found most conversations exhausting because people always wanted something from her. "I don't want anything from you," Danny said, "except maybe to see you actually drink that thing before it turns into a solid." Looked down at her cold drink. Then, for the first time, she laughed. It was a small sound, quiet and rusty, like something that had not been used in a very long time. But it was real. When Danny finally left that night, he looked back and saw watching him through the window. She raised one clawed hand in a small wave. He waved back. And somewhere deep inside, he felt like he had just done something important, even if he could not explain what. 3 days later, Danny returned to the... He told himself it was because of the view. He told himself it was because his ship needed repairs and he had nothing else to do. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wanted to see if the strange, sad would be there again. She was. Sat at the same table in the same corner, wearing different robes but the same distant expression. When she saw Danny walk through the door, something changed in her face. It was small, barely noticeable, but her shoulders relaxed just a little. Danny walked over with 2 cups in his hands. He placed one in front of her and sat down across from her with the other. "What is this?" asked, looking at the steaming cup. "Hot chocolate, earth drink, sweet, warm, makes everything feel a little better." Danny took a sip from his own cup. "Trust me, you'll like it." Lifted the cup carefully, her claws clicking against the ceramic. She sniffed it first, then took a small sip. Her amber eyes widened slightly. "It is pleasant," she admitted. "See, I told you. Humans know a few things about comfort." They sat in silence for a moment, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of quiet that happens between people who are starting to feel safe around each other. "I did not expect you to return," said finally. "Why not?" "Most beings speak to me once and do not come back. They realize who I am, or they become afraid, or they decide I am not worth the effort." She said this calmly, like she was describing the weather, but Danny heard the pain underneath. "Well, I'm not most beings," Danny said, "and I don't scare easy. Besides, you still haven't told me what kind of music you like. I can't let that mystery go unsolved." Looked at him for a long moment. "You truly do not care about my position, my species, the power my kind holds." Danny shrugged. "Should I? You're just a person, scales and horns don't change that. Everyone gets lonely. Everyone wants someone to talk to. That's not a thing or a human thing, that's just a living thing." She was quiet after that, but she kept drinking the hot chocolate. Over the next few weeks, their meetings became a pattern. Whenever Danny docked at 9, he went to the... was always there, waiting at table 7. Sometimes she arrived before him. Sometimes he arrived first, but they always found each other. They talked about small things. Danny told her about his childhood in a small town on Earth, about catching fireflies in summer and building snowmen in winter, listened with fascination. Her had no seasons. The idea of frozen water falling from the sky amazed her. "You actually throw balls of frozen water at each other?" she asked one evening, her voice full of disbelief. "For entertainment." "Snowball fights," Danny laughed. "Best part of winter. You make teams, build forts, and try to hit each other. Last one standing wins." "This sounds like combat." "It is combat, just the fun kind. Nobody gets hurt. Well, mostly nobody. My cousin once got a snowball with ice in it right in the face. He cried for an hour." Shook her head slowly. "Humans are very strange." "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." Danny grinned and leaned back in his chair. "Okay, your turn. Tell me something about your world, something small, something you remember from when you were young." His expression shifted. For a moment she looked uncertain. "I do not often speak of my past." "You don't have to, but I'd like to hear it, only if you want to share." She was silent for a long time. Danny waited. He had learned that needed space to find her words. Pushing her would only make her retreat. Finally she spoke. "When I was very young, before my responsibilities began, there was a garden in my family's home. It grew flowers that only bloomed at night. They glowed silver in the darkness. I would sneak out of my chambers to watch them open." She paused. "I have not thought about that garden in many years." "It sounds beautiful." "It was, it is gone now. Many things are gone." Her voice was soft, heavy with old grief. Danny did not try to fix her sadness. He did not offer empty words or simple solutions. He just sat with her in the weight of that memory and let her feel it without judgment. "Thank you," said quietly. "For what?" "For listening, for not telling me to forget, for not asking what I can give you in return." Danny smiled gently. "That's what friends do." Looked at him sharply. "Friends?" "Yeah, friends, people who show up for each other, people who listen, people who bring each other hot chocolate and talk about snowball fights and glowing flowers." He spread his hands. "That's us, unless you have a problem with that." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, the corners of her mouth lifted. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. "I do not have a problem with that," she said. "Good, then it's settled. We're friends. Which means next time you're buying the drinks." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "I think I can manage that." Later that night, after Danny had returned to his ship, he lay in his bunk and stared at the ceiling. He thought about the sadness she carried, about the way she looked at him like he was something she could not understand. He did not know why she was so lonely. He did not know what responsibilities she spoke of, or why everyone feared her so much. He only knew that when he sat across from her in that small, she seemed a little less like a dragon and a little more like a person who had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. And maybe, Danny thought, that was enough reason to keep showing up. Outside his window, the stars burned cold and distant. But for the first time in a long while, the universe felt a little less empty. Weeks turned into months. They became their sanctuary, a small bubble of peace floating in the chaos of the station. Danny looked forward to his stops at 9 more than anything else in his life. The cargo runs felt longer now, the empty space between stars harder to bear. But knowing that would be waiting at table 7 made every jump through hyperspace worth it. Their conversations had grown deeper. The small talk about food and music had given way to bigger things, dreams, fears, the questions that kept them awake at night. One evening seemed different. She sat with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, her amber eyes fixed on the dark liquid. She had barely spoken since Danny arrived. "Something's wrong," Danny said. It was not a question. Did not look up. "I received news today. A decision I made many cycles ago has caused suffering I did not expect. Thousands of lives affected, families torn apart, and I cannot undo it." Danny leaned forward. "What kind of decision?" She shook her head slowly. I cannot speak of details, but I thought I was doing what was right. I thought I was protecting my people. Instead, I caused pain. Her claws tightened around the cup. This is the curse of my position. Every choice has consequences. Every action ripples outward in ways I cannot predict, and I bear the weight of all of it. Danny was quiet for a moment. He had suspected for a long time that was someone important. The way she spoke about decisions affecting thousands, the way she carried herself, the way she seemed crushed under invisible burdens. But he had never pushed. He figured she would tell him when she was ready. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. Finally looked up. "Yes." Back on Earth, a long time ago, there was a leader. His name was Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln. He lived during one of the darkest times in human history when our people were tearing themselves apart. He had to make choices that got people killed, thousands of people. He knew it would happen, and he made those choices anyway because he believed they would lead to something better. Listened silently. "The thing is," Danny continued, "he never pretended it was easy. He never acted like the deaths did not matter. He carried that weight every single day. There are stories about how he would visit hospitals and sit with wounded soldiers, how he wrote personal letters to families who lost sons. He never hid from the pain he caused. He faced it, and he let it change him." "Did he find peace?" asked softly. "I don't think so. Not really. But he found purpose. He kept going because he believed in something bigger than himself. And when the war ended, when the healing began, people remembered him not for the death but for the hope he gave them." Stared at him. "You believe this applies to me?" "I believe that good leaders are not the ones who never cause harm. Good leaders are the ones who feel the harm they cause and keep trying to do better anyway." Danny reached across the table and very gently placed his hand over hers. Her scales were cool and smooth under his fingers. "You're not a monster. Monsters don't lose sleep over their choices. Monsters don't sit in looking like their hearts are breaking." She did not pull away from his touch. Instead, she turned her hand over and let her claws rest against his palm. "You speak as if you know me," she whispered. "I'm starting to." They sat like that for a long time, hands connected across the table, two beings from different worlds sharing a moment of understanding. Finally spoke again. "In my position, I am surrounded by advisors, generals, servants. They tell me what they think I want to hear. They agree with everything I say. They bow and scrape and never look me in the eyes." Her voice was bitter. "I have not had a real conversation in centuries, not until you." Danny squeezed her hand gently. "Then maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe leaders need people who will tell them the truth, people who will argue with them and challenge them, and remind them that they're still just people underneath all the titles. And you would be such a person." "I'm already being such a person," Danny grinned. "Remember last week when you said you didn't like the music I picked? I argued with you for 20 minutes. I told you your taste was wrong. Would an advisor do that?" Made a sound that was almost a laugh. "No, an advisor would agree and apologize for failing to meet my standards." "Exactly, see, you need me." She looked at him with those ancient amber eyes, and Danny saw something he had never seen before. Vulnerability. Trust. A wall coming down that had stood for longer than human civilization had existed. "Perhaps I do," she said quietly. Later that night, they walked through the station together. It was late and the corridors were mostly empty. Their footsteps echoed against metal floors, moved like a shadow beside him, tall and elegant and impossibly graceful. "Danny," she said as they paused near a viewing window. The stars stretched out before them, endless and bright. "Yeah. I want you to know that these conversations, this friendship, it means more to me than you can understand. You have given me something I thought was lost forever." Danny looked at her. In the starlight, her scales shimmered like a galaxy of their own. "What's that?" "Hope," she said simply. He did not know how to respond to that, so he just stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder, watching the stars burn in the darkness. He still did not know who she really was. He did not know what position she held or what power she commanded. But in that moment, none of it mattered. She was his friend, and he would show up for her, no matter what. That was the human way. That was the only way Danny knew how to be. And somewhere deep inside felt something stirring, a warmth she had forgotten, a light in the darkness of her ancient, lonely heart. A light with a human name. It happened on a night like any other. Danny sat across from at their usual table. They were playing cards, a simple human game he had taught her weeks ago. She was surprisingly good at it, her face impossible to read behind those glowing amber eyes. Danny suspected she was cheating somehow, but he could never prove it. "You're bluffing," he said, narrowing his eyes at her. "Am I?" Laid down her cards, a perfect hand, again. Danny groaned and threw his cards on the table. "That's 4 games in a row. How are you doing this?" Perhaps humans are simply predictable. Or perhaps someone has been counting cards. His mouth curved into what might have been a smile. "I would never." Danny laughed and reached for his drink. There was quiet tonight, only a handful of patrons scattered across the room. The lights were dim, the atmosphere peaceful. It felt like they had all the time in the world. Then the doors exploded inward. Armored figures poured into their boots thundering against the floor. They were massive and terrifying in their black battle armor. Their helmets covered their faces, and their weapons hummed with deadly energy. Patrons screamed and dove under tables. The waiter dropped a tray of drinks and scrambled for the back exit. Danny's first instinct was not to run. His first instinct was to protect. He jumped to his feet and put himself between her and the soldiers, spreading his arms wide. His heart pounded against his ribs. He had no weapon, no armor, no chance against even one of these warriors. But he stood his ground anyway. "Get back," he shouted. "Leave her alone." The soldiers stopped. Every single one of them froze in place, weapons half raised, staring at the small human standing between them and their target. Then they did something Danny did not expect. They dropped to their knees. Every soldier, all at once, knelt on the floor with their heads bowed. The clatter of armor echoed through the silence. Danny blinked. "What the?" A new figure stepped through the ruined doorway. This wore no helmet. His scales were gray with age, and his eyes burned like dying coals. He moved with the careful precision of someone who had spent a lifetime in service. "Your Eternal Majesty," the Gray said, bowing deeply toward. "We have searched for you across 12 systems. Your council is in chaos. Your generals demand your return. You cannot keep disappearing like this." Danny felt the world shift beneath his feet. He turned slowly to look at. She had risen from her seat. Her posture had changed, her shoulders squared, her chin lifted. The sadness in her eyes had been replaced by something harder, something ancient and powerful and terrifying. "Counselor," she said, her voice cold as deep space, "I gave orders that I was not to be disturbed. With respect, Your Majesty, the Dominion cannot function without you. There are treaties to sign, wars to end. 1,000 worlds await your judgment." Danny's mind was spinning. "Majesty, Dominion, 1,000 worlds." He said, his voice barely a whisper, "Who are you?" She turned to face him. For a moment, just a moment, the hardness in her eyes softened. The ancient empress faded, and his friend returned. "I am," she said quietly, "the eternal flame, supreme ruler of the Dominion." Danny stared at her. The Dominion, half the galaxy, trillions of lives, and she had been sitting across from him, drinking hot chocolate, losing at cards. "You're the Empress," he said slowly, "the actual Empress." "Yes. And I've been making fun of your taste in music." Despite everything's mouth twitched. "Yes." Danny ran a hand through his hair. The soldiers were still kneeling. The counselor was watching him with obvious confusion. The entire had gone dead silent. "Okay," Danny said finally. "Okay, that's a lot." I wanted to tell you, said, but I was afraid. Afraid of what? That you would see me differently. That you would start bowing and scraping like everyone else. That I would lose the one person who treated me like a person instead of a crown. Danny looked at her, really looked at her, past the scales and the horns and the glow of ancient power. He saw the woman who had laughed at his terrible jokes, the friend who had listened to his stories about Earth, the lonely soul who had found comfort in a small at the edge of nowhere. She had not changed, not really, she was still. Well, Danny said, this does explain why you always insisted on paying for the drinks. Stared at him. The counselor made a choking sound. The soldiers shifted uneasily on their knees. And then laughed. It was not the small, rusty laugh he had heard before. This was real, full, echoing through the like music. It was the laugh of someone who had been holding their breath for centuries and finally let it go. You are impossible, she said through her laughter. I just told you I rule half the galaxy and you make a joke about drinks. Danny shrugged. What else am I supposed to do? Start bowing, call you your majesty? That seems weird. We're in the middle of a card game. The counselor stepped forward, his expression outraged. You dare speak to the eternal flame with such disrespect. You are nothing but a primitive human cargo hauler. Counselor said, and her voice was suddenly ice. This human has shown me more respect in the past few months than you have in the past few centuries. You will not insult him in my presence. The counselor's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He bowed stiffly. Forgive me, your majesty. Danny looked at, so what happens now? She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked down at the table, at the scattered cards, at the half-finished drinks. Now, she said softly, I suppose I have to return to my duties, my responsibilities, my cage of gold and fire. Do you have to go right this second? Blink to what? Danny sat back down in his chair. He picked up the cards and started shuffling them. I mean, you've been missing for weeks already. What's another hour? We never finished our game. And you were definitely cheating, so I demand a rematch. The soldiers exchanged confused glances. The counselor looked like he might faint, but smiled, slow and warm and real. She sat back down across from him. Deal the cards, she said. And for one more hour, in a small at the edge of the galaxy, an empress and a cargo hauler played cards like old friends. Because that is what they were. The story spread like fire across the stars. A human cargo hauler had befriended the empress. He had sat with her in a common, shared drinks with her, played cards with her, and when armed soldiers burst through the doors, he had stood in front of her without hesitation, not knowing who she was, not caring about the power she held, just protecting his friend. The ambassadors discussed it in their clicking language, wondering what kind of species produced such fearless fools. The trade councils debated its meaning for hours, trying to understand why a human would risk death for someone he barely knew. The minor species of the outer rim whispered about it in market squares and cantinas, passing the tale from ship to ship like precious cargo. For the first time in centuries, people spoke about the Empress not with fear but with curiosity. Who was this woman who sought friendship in lonely? Who was this ruler who laughed at jokes and lost at card games? The galaxy had seen her as a monster, a conqueror, a force of nature. But a monster would not have a friend like Danny Cole. And so the story changed things. Danny did not know any of this at first. He returned to his cargo runs, jumping from system to system, carrying boxes and crates and trying to process everything that had happened. The Empress was the Empress. His brain kept getting stuck on that fact, like a song playing on repeat. 3 weeks later, his ship received a transmission. It was an official summons to the HFY. The message was written in formal language, full of titles and ceremonial phrases. But at the very end, in a different font, someone had added a single line. Please come, I miss our conversations. Danny set his course for HFY. There was nothing like he expected. He had imagined a dark, forbidding place, all black stone and fire. Instead, Eth was beautiful. The capital city rose from a valley of silver grass, its towers spiraling toward a sky painted with 3 moons. Gardens bloomed everywhere, filled with flowers that glowed softly in the twilight. It looked like something from a dream. Guards escorted Danny through the imperial palace. The halls were vast, lined with statues of ancient emperors and empresses. Bowed as he passed, their amber eyes following him with open curiosity. The small human who had befriended their ruler. The strange creature who knew no fear. Finally, they brought him to a garden, and there, standing among the silver flowers, was. She wore robes of deep purple, embroidered with golden thread that caught the moonlight. A thin crown rested on her brow, elegant and simple. She looked every inch the empress she was. But when she saw Danny, her face lit up with a smile he recognized. Not the empress, just. "You came," she said. "You asked." Danny walked toward her. "Nice place you've got here. A little big, maybe. Must be hard to find the bathroom." Laughed that full, real laugh he had grown to love. "I have missed you, Danny Cole." "I've missed you too." He stopped in front of her, looking up at her tall frame. "So, why am I here? Not that I'm complaining, but I'm pretty sure cargo haulers don't usually get invited to imperial palaces." His expression grew serious. "I have a proposal for you." "Should I be worried?" "Perhaps." She gestured for him to walk with her through the garden. "Since our friendship became known, I have noticed changes in my dominion. Other species are less afraid to approach us. Negotiations that had stalled for decades are moving forward. Alliances that seemed impossible are being discussed." She paused by a pool of still water, the 3 moons reflected on its surface. "You did something to me, Danny. You reminded me what it felt like to be seen as a person. And I want to share that feeling with my people." Danny listened carefully. "What are you saying?" "I want you to serve as a cultural advisor to the Dominion, a bridge between humanity and my empire, someone who will remind my people that strength is not just conquest, that power is not just fear." She turned to face him. "I want you to help me become the ruler you already see me as." Danny was silent for a long moment. A cultural advisor to the most powerful empire in the galaxy, him, a cargo hauler from Earth. "That's a pretty big job," he said finally. "Yes. I don't know anything about politics or diplomacy." "I know. I'll probably say the wrong thing and offend everyone." "Almost certainly." Danny looked at her, at his friend, at the lonely dragon he had found in a who had turned out to be so much more. "I have one condition," he said. Raised an eyebrow. "And what is that?" "We still meet for coffee or hot chocolate, whatever. No guards, no titles, no imperial business, just us, 2 friends talking." Something shifted in his ancient eyes, something warm and bright and precious. "That," she said softly, "is a condition I am happy to accept." Danny grinned. "Then you've got yourself an advisor, Your Majesty." She corrected. "When we are alone, I am just." "Deal." They stood together in the garden as the 3 moons climbed higher in the sky. The silver flowers swayed in a gentle breeze. Somewhere in the palace, servants were preparing a feast in Danny's honor. Diplomats were writing speeches about the new era of human relations. The galaxy was holding its breath, waiting to see what this strange partnership would bring. But in that moment, none of it mattered. There was just a human and a dragon, standing side by side, looking up at the stars they would now navigate together. Danny said quietly, "Yes. Thank you for trusting me, for letting me in." She did not answer right away. Instead, she reached out and took his hand, her clawed fingers gentle against his skin. "No, Danny," she said. "Thank you for seeing me, for reminding me that even empresses can be lonely, for showing me that the smallest act of kindness can change everything." Danny squeezed her hand. And somewhere across the galaxy, in a small on 9, A waiter cleared table 7 and wondered if the strange human and the sad dragon would ever return. They would. Again and again, year after year, long after their names became legend. Because some friendships are stronger than empires, and some stories are worth telling forever.